And I don't necessarily know how you get that forgive the enemy idea into the culture to get people to think that that's a good idea, because I think in our genes, biologically, our intuition is, get even, kill their family. Never forget. I think that's part of the problem with our politics now, is that there's really no forgiveness for people. There's no forgiveness mechanism. And I just wonder, how does secular humanism take that idea that we have empirical evidence, scientific evidence that that's the way to be, that's the most pro-social way to be, but how do we convince people to be that way without all the religious apparatus? So I had a great discussion with the YouTuber Aron Raw. He is a longtime YouTuber and anti-theist. Many of you wanted me to have a discussion with him, and here is that discussion. Aron Raw is the Southwest Regional Director of the American Atheist. He is the director of the Phylogeny Explorer Project. He's author of The Foundational Falsehoods of Creationism. He is producer of the Unapologetic Science Lesson videos, board member of the Directors of the American Atheists, and a board member of the Center for Free Thought and Equality. So his anti-theist, new atheist street cred is impeccable. And this was a very amicable conversation. I enjoyed it a lot, and I would like to have more conversations like this. I had prepared an opening statement that I mentioned briefly in here, but never read. I was going to read that at the beginning here, but I don't think it's really necessary. I think we covered everything that I really wanted to talk to, and I think my position is pretty clear in this video. So obviously, if you have any comments, please leave them in the comments below, and I'm curious your feedback on this discussion. It was a lot of fun, and I think it's pretty informative. You've been on YouTube for a long time. What is something that you love about YouTube?
I love that it's kind of an emergent meritocracy. I mean, anybody can be on, anybody has a voice, it's so easy to make videos on YouTube, but there's a lot of talent on YouTube. So there will be people that emerge either as ridiculous or that they emerge as competent. And so there's a number of people that have aptitude and ability in various things that they talk about. And I'm not just talking about science either. I'm talking about, tutorials and technology or what have you. There's a lot of people that really know their stuff, and they get this information out in a way that the average people can absorb a lot more effectively than just reading. I like the fact that you can present, as I've done with so many of my series, we have the audio, and then we can just flash various images and video to go along with that. So, I mean, you get a multi-level experience, and you can pack a lot of information in. And then I put in a lot of references to sometimes that if you want to pause the video, there is text telling you what else you can look up or what specific thing that you need to know in addition to that is, if you want to take the time to really pack the information in.
Yeah, I'm completely addicted to YouTube for the same reason. It's so awesome to be able to see what other people are interested in, and it is such a great learning tool. So and that's the things that really impressed me, is that there really is talent out there. There are people that know their stuff, and it's not hard to find them, really. Yeah, it's great. So besides yourself, who is your favorite atheist author?
Okay. I don't have opportunity to read a lot of books. I mean, I really, lately, in the last few years, I don't have time to read books practically at all. Hector Garcia, however, I did an interview with him a few months ago, and I have to read a second one of his books now, because I have to do an interview with him in March. He did one called Alpha God, and I was really impressed with the way that he had blocked out all of his sources and everything, and all the way that he comes to his conclusions, brilliantly done. The way that he depicts everything was very good. Hitchens was a great orator, and I know that his thoughts carry very well. It's just with the books, it doesn't come with that voice that he had. So the book is somehow lacking in that. I wish I had time to read more like a proper academic pursuer should.
Yeah, I'm an audiobook fan, so I'm always listening to books in the car or when I'm doing dishes or whatever. So I don't have any time to read books either, but thank goodness for my Audible account. Otherwise, I wouldn't be reading anything either.
Have you listened to Hitchens?
I've listened to probably every single Hitchens video there is on the internet. And I was going to say Hitchens is my favorite of the Four Horsemen because I'm a retired comedy screenwriter and Hitchens is just hilarious.
What's funny about Hitchens in audiobook is that there's nobody controlling him. So he starts out very strong. And so what were those last, I don't know, 3 to 5 words that you said there?
That's so awesome. And Hitch is so he has so much gravitas that you can't really pull back and say, oh, like we need to get that fixed.
Yeah, pretty much, I think.
So I have an opening statement that I want to read to you. I'm probably going to read this terribly, and I might actually edit it out and put in a good reading of it. But I'll get the gist of it. I've been wanting to have this conversation with you for a long time because as someone, like I said, I've watched all of your Fundamental Falsehoods of Creationists series. I was a huge fan of yours when I first started getting into YouTube. Like all of your arguments are right on the money. I've read all of the atheist authors that have arguments against religion. But I'm a science nerd. Like one of the reasons I really liked your stuff was because you pulled in the evolution stuff. And there was always a placeholder in my mind that religion is so widespread that it seemed like it had to be some sort of evolutionary adaptation. And I know that the Four Horsemen were making an argument that it's no longer useful and that we can get past it. And I'm completely sympathetic for that, to that argument. But I really don't think they've made the huge effort to understand religion. And I'm very interested in the secular humanist movement, which I know that you're a part of. But I really think there is a lot of scientific research coming out now that we could potentially deconstruct religion and create a more powerful artificial religion. Although artificial religion is a terrible name for it. That's not good marketing at all. But do you know there's this idea in product development where they're using evolutionary understanding. They're looking at things in nature that have evolved over time, and they're thinking of those things as going through this iterated product cycle over generations. One of them that I read about recently was, I guess, shark skin has this molecular pattern on it that doesn't allow bacteria to adhere to. And now they're trying to replicate that in hospitals so that they can make the tile out of basically this molecular pattern that is in shark skin, which is an amazing thing, but it is reverse engineering evolution. And I feel like there hasn't been a lot of gains in reverse engineering religion from an evolutionary perspective. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that the reason that religion works is because it's based on emotion rather than any intellectual curiosity at all. I mean, when I read a supposedly holy book, like I did, like when I was a teenager, I read A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, The Science of Self-Realization. Oh, God, I wasn't Hindu, but I thought that somebody that writes a book must know what he's talking about, and he's the fucking Swami for the Beatles, and I was a big Beatles fan at the time, being a kid. So I read this, and he's talking about reincarnation and how all of this works. And as far as talking about how it all works and what it all is, I'm down with that. But then it starts getting into the mythology, of what Krishna and Shiva did and all of the stupid stories. And I don't want a story. I want to know how things work. I want to know how the cycle of life works. I want to know what are chakras and how does the psychic energies work. But it turns out nobody knows. They just made it up. But I'm an ignorant kid. I'm a teenager. I don't know that. So I'm reading from the world authority on these matters. And I was hugely disappointed. Other people don't care about the mechanics. They don't want to know how things work. They don't want to know. And that's a concept that I can't grasp. I'm not interested in the story. I don't care about the emotional aspect of it. But then again, there was Carl Sagan's Cosmos, and that touched an emotional nerve as well. So it wasn't completely dry and sterile science. It was science that had a humanist compassion and heart to it. So it's understanding, and it's the joy of understanding and improving that understanding, and realizing that the first thing you need to do to improve your understanding is realize you don't know everything already. How can you improve your understanding if you already think your knowledge is perfect? So how do you improve that understanding? By finding the flaws in your current perception and correcting them. So how do we figure out what we think we know now that we don't actually know, or don't know as accurately as we thought we did, and then fix it? And how do we know what the fix is? There's got to be a method to figure out which direction is the correction and which one strays further from the path. This is something religion can't and won't do. That's why there's tens of thousands of different denominations for all these different religions. But anytime you walk away from religion entirely, if you walk away from faith, everybody then reverses direction, zeroes in on the one ultimate truth. Because if you go away from faith, you start looking at evidence, and evidence always points the same direction, because there is only one actual truth. There's 10,000 lies, and that's the direction that religion is going. Some people would just rather have whatever they find to be a pretty story for whatever reason, and that can be their religious belief. That can be, as a friend of mine was talking to me today about ancient aliens, that he actually believes in that, and that can be astral projection. It can be your transcendental meditation. You can be what you believe to be the spirits of your dead ancestors. It can be the psychic impressions from extraterrestrials, and it turns out that if you talk to the ghosts of your dead ancestors, talk to your favorite god, commune with whatever astral projection entity is trying to reach you, or the extraterrestrials through your tinfoil hat, eventually they will start talking back, even if they never existed except in your own imagination. That's the problem with prayer. Prayer is talking to other people, imaginary friends, until they start talking back, which they eventually will.
I agree with everything that you're saying, that religion is about emotion. It really is. But I think just looking at religion from an evolutionary perspective, you could conceptualize these sects splitting off as a form of speciation. Now, I do agree with you that religion is a failed science. But religion is a failed science because it never really was a science. The evolutionary purpose of religion, from where I sit and from the scientific literature that I've read, and where the scientific community seems to be honing in on, is that religion forms people into these teams, these groups, and they build a morality or an ethic on a fundamental idea that they sacralize. And the reason they sacralize that idea is because their whole ethic is built upon that idea. So if you change that idea, their whole ethic completely falls apart. Like if you take the divinity of Jesus out of the Christian story, then all of a sudden the whole ethic doesn't make any sense at all. So, but I often see the new atheist side, the anti-theist side, they're building an ethic as well. And I'm not confident that the ethic that they're building on top of what you would call like scientific realism is an ethic that everyone can build their ethic on. I'm with you. I am a scientific materialist myself, and I do believe, like, I'm a curious person. I want to know the truth. The truth is sacred for me. It is the number one thing. And I don't mean, I'm not trying to be incendiary by saying sacred. When people say sacred, I just substitute infinite value, because that's really what they mean. They just mean something that has infinite value. And even in science, we have ideas like the idea that science is changeable. That has infinite value to us. If it didn't, then this whole scientific endeavor would be useless. So if you look at it that way, and look at religion from that perspective, it opens up a whole new world of what's going on with religion that it's very difficult for me to condemn some of the behaviors just because like humanity is on a wide spectrum, and I don't know that everybody can build an ethic on top of scientific materialism. And there's also there's also whether or not you can actually have scientific answers to certain fundamental questions that we argue over in politics, abortion, immigration, things like this. Those are moral questions or ethical questions that I don't necessarily know that science can give us answers to.
I see the evolutionary standpoint of religion being the type of controls that they have there. You will believe what we believe, and if you don't believe that, we will kill you. And you will murder the infidel on the word of one or two witnesses. That creates a very strong evolutionary selective pressure to promote that religion. And then they further enhance that with punishments for apostasy and for heresy. So you will not stop believing and you will not deviate. You will believe exactly what you're told, and that reinforces everybody else's delusion. And if you look at what the delusion means, it's exactly what religion is. It's a firm false belief that will not change despite evidence to the contrary. I mean, people hear all the evidence, all the arguments against them, and then it just reaffirms their faith somehow. It causes the backfire effect. When you challenge that faith, well, then they feel persecuted, which somehow vindicates their position. So there's a lot of religious perspective that if you're being persecuted, if somebody's criticizing you because what you believe is stupid, well, that proves that your stupid belief is actually true. And then they do the erroneous association thing. And that's the bigger problem. The erroneous association where if you love your fellow man, if you love music, if you love art, if you appreciate anything, the beauty of nature, whatever, you erroneously attribute that to your religious belief. It doesn't have anything to do with your religious belief, not remotely. And we all have this appreciation. I could just as easily say that my appreciation of science and nature or of art or whatever, music, even cathedrals. I go into Catholic cathedrals very often, when I'm traveling, and because there's some magnificent buildings. You think about what you try not to think about what horror went on in there, but there's magnificent architecture. It's hard to look at a stained glass window and not appreciate the art that went involved. But that doesn't have anything to do with a religious belief. That doesn't vindicate that any of the beliefs are true. You may be a nice person. You may love your fellow man. You may do great cookouts and have great family values and all that. It has nothing to do with your religion. And in fact, we know that statistically, religion fails quite often because it appeals to people who have control issues. It appeals to people who have mania, who have some degree of dementia or are inclined to irrational thinking, because it is an irrational belief. And so conspiracy theories and all like that are endorsed in religion. Religious congregations certainly don't point out when people probably need psychiatric help. I mean, the more voices you hear, the more they encourage that sort of thing. So it takes a lot of the detriment of humanity and highlights that and kind of twists it around in a beautiful way, and so makes people feel good about themselves just because they're part of whatever it is that they're part of. Doesn't even matter what the religion is. And everybody says that their religion is unique, that their scriptures are proven more than any other scriptures. I mean, how many times have people like this week told me, well, no other scripture has been proven to the degree that the Bible has. But then I go over to the Muslim channel, and that's exactly what they're saying about the Quran, right? And I have argued with Hindus to say exactly the same thing. No other scripture has been proven to the degree that the Vedas have, or the Bhagavad Gita. So everybody's making the same claim, and there's no way to reason with any of them, because they always say, well, you're not going to change my mind and I'm not going to change yours. And I have to say, but you can change my mind. If you had something that was actually true, if you could show me the truth of your belief, you could change my mind. I have truth I can show you. And by truth, I mean things we can show to be true. I can show you the truth of that. I can show you the facts. But we know that religious people do not care about facts. I've had people tell me, and this is the most frustrating thing, I've brought this up all the time, but people say, these may be what the facts are, but I prefer to believe this. And why does something have to be true before I believe it? Why can't I believe things that aren't true? What does it hurt if I believe things that are not true? Well, if you're admitting to me that you already know that what you believe is not true, why are you believing it? So there's a value system. To me, the only value any information has is however accurate you can show it to be. And if you can't show that it is accurate at all, then that information has no value at all. And that destroys every sermon given in any religion. If you can't show that what you're telling me is true, why are you even wasting my time? But other people don't care if there's any truth to it or not, as long as it sounds pretty to them. And sometimes sound pretty to them can also be very hateful. And so you could expound all kinds of hate, and that will appeal to certain people. So you have whole religions that are based on hate, which is another mystery, which is another reason that I can't connect with them.
So you've mentioned a few things, and I want to touch on all of them. You mentioned the voluntary versus involuntary conscription into religions. You've also mentioned that religion is a path to power, which I want to touch on. You've talked about between group conflict, which I want to touch on. But before we move into any of those topics, is there anything positive from religion that you can point out?
Not a thing. I'm being honest. I mean, while you can say that they've made some nice art, I was an art student for a few years, and I saw that when Christianity when the church took over Europe, for example, art degraded horribly. So there was art that was better before the church took over, and Islam did the same thing. I mean, the Arabic world was the leader in scientific information before Islam ruined all of that. So I'm an anti-theist, meaning that I see religion as a net negative against humanity, that it has perverted, retarded, or reversed progress in every application it has ever touched. It statistically, it shows a negative effect on everything and everyone. So I can't say that there's any good that can come out of it. The level of abuse is higher among religious people. The level of child abuse is significantly higher among religious people. And statistics show that the more religious someone is, the more abusive they are. So it's really that bad. And then why is that? It's all because of faith. Faith is the real problem. It's not any one religion. People say that I bash Christianity and I don't bash Islam enough. Well, I do. I bash all the religions, and I bash them because they're all based on faith. Faith is not a virtue. It is the most dishonest position it is possible to have. It really is. The only thing that can make faith less honest than it already is to be an apologist for faith, which means that you're a professional liar to defend the faith. Because you have to systematically make up excuses to rationalize or justify or in other ways dismiss any and all arguments against you to be unreasonable. So again, you're being unreasonable to defend the delusion. It's wholly negative. There's no good to it at all.
So as a scientific materialist, or a rationalist, I agree with you 100%. The thing that I am worried about, and you called yourself an anti-theist. I often call myself an atheist because I can't go as far as calling myself an anti-theist, because I really believe implicitly in the claim of anti-theism is a claim without substantiated evidence. It's the claim that the world would be a better place without religion. I don't necessarily know that we have the evidence to make that claim.
Well, I think I do. And that is because by the definition of what a religion is, it's forcing people to believe things that are not true or that are not evidently true. Even if there was a possibility that they might be true, you are reversing the thought process. And religion reverses everything. That was a presentation that I gave where I show how religion turns everything upside down. That religion wants people to be absolutely convinced of things that are not evidently true and can't be true. So it's never wise to believe anything without reservation, without question, or without reason. But that is what religion demands. And then religion, the Quran and the Bible both describe a fool as exactly the opposite of what a fool would be described in the dictionary. A fool is someone who too readily accepts improbable claims from questionable sources on insufficient evidence. That's what a fool is, but that's what the Bible and the Quran both want you to be. So they say a fool is anybody who doesn't believe the nonsense in those books.
So I completely agree with you again. Like, I want to understand the world as it truly is. I honestly want to understand the world as it truly is. I'm not willing to go as far as saying that religion has no redeeming value. I think that there is redeeming value if you look at it as a way of imparting ethics to people. And I know we will probably disagree over that because, there are different ethical systems. You've mentioned voluntary or involuntary conscription a couple times here. So I want to press back to the voluntary part. If all religions are voluntary, doesn't that change the equation? Because people are opting into these systems, these religious systems, without force. And I think that you and I will both agree that forceful conscription of people is immoral, unethical, whatever you want to call it. But there is quite a bit of Christianity in America, good old free America, that is completely voluntary. People abandon the religion of their parents all the time. We began the conversation. You were talking about a friend of yours that's into ancient aliens. Like, that's the new thing. Like, it's completely voluntary for him, right? So it's difficult for me to say that anyone's putting a gun to his head and saying, you must believe this stuff. People seem to innately want to believe strange things.
Yeah.
So does that change the equation if it's voluntary? Like, if we're pushing for, if the difference between voluntary and involuntary, I think, is important.
All right. So religion has two aspects to it. One is it is dishonest to assert as fact blind, baseless speculation that is not evidently true. Yet that's what all religions do. So inherently in the description of a definition of what a religion is, we have a dishonest fault to begin with. Then there's the second aspect where you must believe that, and you can't not believe that. You can't question it. You have to have faith. You have to convince yourself this is true. No matter how wrong it was to start with, you have to adopt that belief, and you can't change your mind. You can't let anyone reason with you. What's the worst thing the devil did in the Bible? He tried to reason with Jesus. That's the thing you can't do. You can't reason. So you have to hold a position that is not evidently true, that has to be, that in some degree has to be false. It should already be considered false if it's not evidently true, because science is only concerned with what's supported by the evidence, what's not supported by the evidence. If it's not supported by the evidence, it's not worth serious consideration. But religion is to take what is not supported by the evidence and then assert it as fact, and then refuse to be reasoned where that ridiculous assertion is concerned. How can there be a positive aspect to that?
Well, from my evolutionary thinking, the positive aspect of that is completely social. People are using these religious systems to bind themselves into a religious community with certain rules. And if those rules are pro-social rules, like don't lie to people, don't steal from people, then I think that could be viewed as a positive aspect of religion. I agree with you that believing strange things is not good in the scientific realm. That's not going to get us anywhere.
So let's look at that pro-social thing that you're talking about. Whenever anybody, for good and righteous reasons, realizes that there's something wrong with what they believe, that there's an error there and it needs to be corrected, or it's something that's unsubstantiated and therefore should be questioned, those people are then shunned by their community as being evil. Somehow you are evil if you don't believe the horseshit. You're supposed to go along with that at all costs, even if it means abandoning your own family or being abandoned by your own family. As Jesus said, in the stories, the character of Jesus in the fable attributed to that character said that he is going to separate. He doesn't have family values. He's here to disrupt families, to separate parents from their children and husbands from their wives, all over this ridiculous belief that you have to pick up your cross and join him. to the surrender of everything else. So you're not going to be a productive member of any family anymore. You now belong to him.
Yeah, I agree with you. The question that I have, though, is this part of human psychology? And if it's a part of human psychology, the idea that just getting rid of the institution of religion doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get rid of the human psychology, because the human psychology is in our genes. And we even have political organizations who exhibit the same exact behavior that you're speaking about now, where if you don't believe a certain thing, you will be ostracized from that group. I mean, your stance on
politics being, it's not that separate from religion. Politics is even less rational than religion is. And you would think that politics is based on, that there's pragmatic value in your political situation. Most of my political beliefs have pragmatic value, or I wouldn't hold this position. But when I argue with people on matters of politics, I find that there's no way to reason with it. It's based almost entirely on prejudice. So if we were talking strictly about religion, I would say that absolutely religion is not in our genes. But there is this irrational aspect that is always in politics that is way irrational. And I have lost family and friends over their subscription to religion. Yes, that's true. But I've actually lost more family and friends over politics.
So that's sad. I think that's a fundamental problem with our culture now. I honestly do. And one of the reasons why I'm so interested in understanding religion from a scientific perspective is to get rid of those downsides. Like I think there's a bit of a tribalism going on here. And I mean, just to be completely honest with you, I think that the anti-theists are making a claim that the heart of their ethics is this scientific idea that truth about the natural world is the highest value. And that is fundamentally at odds with just human psychology. I think it's amazing that we can have a science tribe, that we can have a group of people that live by that ethic. But I am not convinced that the whole world can live by that ethic. And I think understanding how groups form, how groups have this united ethic that bring value to the world in different ways, I think that's a valuable thing to have. But what I see a lot of us acting out a ancient tribal psychology that we have to eliminate the tribe over the hill because, they may come and kill us in the middle of the night and take all our women. So I see that playing out in politics. One of the reasons why I see people losing their friends and family over politics is because, well, it's complicated, because when you're building an ethic, when you're saying, the heart of my ethic is, Jesus is the Son of God, or the heart of my ethic is that always knowing what's factually true about the world is more important. Not knowing that is going to make my life terrible. Like, you're building a whole philosophy on top of that idea. And if you take that idea out, that fundamental idea out, it changes your whole worldview. So people are not able to substitute those ideas out. But people do form a social community around those ideas, and those ideas do become sacred. I see in the anti-theist community all the time them taking the idea that, factual truth is sacred. I think I had an interaction with you on Twitter where you had said that you can't form a community around something that, truth needs to be the base of every community. And just empirically looking around the world, I think we can agree that that's not true. I mean, the church has taken over the world on something that is not, you and I would both say, is not factually true. But
and they outnumber us. People who don't care what the truth is and who admit that they don't care what the truth is actually outnumber those who do.
Yeah, I think that's a point in my favor because I think it's just a thing, a point of human psychology. I'm amazed that so many people can build an ethic on the factual truth. I'm one of them. You're one of them, and the whole idea of the scientific community is based on that. And there are even people who are in the scientific community that they bifurcate their life. They have a religious life on the side where they allow themselves to believe in things that aren't necessarily factually correct to be a part of a community to be a part of something greater than themselves. So they get fulfillment there, but they step into the science lab and they would never adopt that ethic. So they literally have two ethics going.
On that note, I've talked to a number of scientists who, a couple different angles. Dr. Glenn Morton, for example, was a young Earth creationist. He was an author for the creationist magazines at the time, and he was a petrogeologist. So he was forced Monday through Friday to accept that the Earth is millions of years old. He can't do his job if the Earth is not millions of years old. Literally nothing in the world makes sense. If a world is 6,000 years old can't do what he's doing. He can't function on misinformation. But then on the weekends, he said that he would believe the Earth is 6,000 years old on the weekends and understand that it is millions of years old Monday through Friday, because you have to. So in his community, he has to believe things that he knows are not true, and then he has to work with accurate information during the rest of the week because the misinformation can't function. And then I've talked to other people who have decided that they started out scientific. They have an understanding of science. They still accept evolution and all of that, but they just decided that they want to start believing in God. Why? Because they want to. Why? Because they want to. Because it makes them feel good to be part of a church community. Why they would want that, I have no idea. But that's and I've interviewed a number of these people, the people who you can verify actually were atheists, who had made expressions about accurate arguments for atheism once upon a time, and now they are believers. And their arguments for why they have accepted, why they've adopted Christianity or whatever, are actually even more vacuous than the people who were born into that religion to begin with. It's a mystery to me. It's entirely emotional. But the best admission that I've got is I started believing it because I wanted to.
So do you think believing things about the immaterialistic world have less of an impact than believing wrong things about the material world? Like believing in aliens is something where you actually believe something about the material world. But obviously, like believing Jesus is the Son of God doesn't really affect the material world.
Yeah, to the degree that I'm talking, that the two scientists that I just mentioned, they both come from opposite perspectives. One started out atheist, one started out a young Earth creationist, and where they both are now is that they accept the facts of science, the incontrovertible, the demonstrably accurate facts of science, but then they also make believe is the word I should use. They make believe this poppycock because I don't know. It's just is it fun to play dress up? Is it fun to play pretend? I don't know. Yeah, but there's obviously a greater detriment if you're a religious extremist, and by that I mean like flat earthers or the conspiracy theorists, the creationists, the people who believe things that we can prove are not true and which also impede their ability to function. So we know that only accurate information has practical application, and the guy Monday through Friday who's a petrogeologist, he knows that a 6,000-year-old Earth is not going to produce results. He's not going to be able to find oil. He's not going to be able to read a geologic map if he thinks that everything was laid down in one day by a damn flood. He has to go what the actual science really says and accept the millions of years, or he can't earn a living. And it's not just because he's part of a conspiracy. It's because the science doesn't work if the information's wrong.
Right. I feel that I understand this willingness to believe strange things. I don't know if you know, Brett Weinstein has a term for it. The evolutionary biologist David Sloan Wilson has a term for it. David Sloan Wilson calls it factual realism versus practical realism. And Brett Weinstein has metaphorical truth versus literal truth, where he's saying that believing something that's metaphorically true or practically true has evolutionary advantages over believing something that is factually true. And there's even the cognitive scientist Don Hoffman, who's done computer modeling, showing that believing literal reality actually drives species extinct, that our cognitive software is designed to fixate on things that are socially beneficial, that are fitness enhancing things over factual reality. So there's plenty of cases, like scientific empirical cases, to be made where understanding literal truth or practical truth, or not practical truth, but factual truth, is not necessarily advantageous for people at the social level. So I think those things have to be taken into account if we're talking about building something like secular humanism, which is a potential substitute for religion. I don't know how, and if we stick to the voluntary thing, which I think you and I probably both agree that voluntary, if you must have religion, we want them to be voluntary. We don't want them to be involuntary. That in order to build a substitute for religion that people will want to adhere to, want to incorporate into their lives, and atheists are like building simulated churches or simulated church experiences. I know this. You've probably been to a couple of them. So I think
I don't think we're gonna properly simulate religion until we start mass molesting children.
Well, I want to come out here that I am very much against that. If that is going to be incorporated, into secular humanism, I object.
Well, see, that's the purpose of I was going to bring up secular humanism myself, is because atheism by itself, pure science by itself, the pursuit of the truth is what the facts are, not absolute truth, right? Tentative, the best of our understanding, what we can show to be true. That's all. That's the most we're going to call truth, and we usually won't even use the word truth then. But this is how we improve our understanding. This is what matters to us. But that doesn't get us there. And I mean, when I say it doesn't get us there, it's not enough for the human experience. And there are people who advocate that that's what they believe in, but that's not actually what they believe in, because they also hold a bunch of different beliefs, whether we're political or they're social or whatever, that are clearly not true. And they're not going to change those positions because it's based on prejudice. And that's another problem. I have a huge problem with prejudice, with people holding a position for irrational reasons that they don't even realize that they are irrational reasons, but they're not going to change their mind. I have a friend that he was coming over to our house for dinner, and I had to tell my wife, now this guy, when he walks in the house, it won't be 5 minutes before he blames everything wrong with the world today on liberals. He will say that knowing that I'm a liberal myself. He's just too stupid to realize what he's doing. And he's going to do that. And so he did. 5 minutes. 5 minutes in, and then he starts telling me that I'm not really a liberal, that I'm a classical. No, I'm not a classical liberal. I'm an actual liberal, and you don't know what you're talking about. And so he started criticizing that the problem that people don't agree with him is because they went to those schools, and that we need to get rid of those damn teachers. My wife was a public school teacher at the time. I'm like, can you just put your foot in your mouth any further? Do we need to feed you? Because you're obviously eating your feet. There are people that adopt these positions that are based entirely, to some degree or whether, on a prejudice, and they're not willing to reconsider that position. So the thing is that science doesn't produce the ethics by itself. A lot of people think that science produces nihilism. And there's a fair point to be made for that. It is if we understand that nihilism isn't the negative aspect that a lot of people make it out to be. But if you want the positive aspect, then you need to look at where our human ethics come from, and that's where we get humanism. Humanism is the realization that we need real world solutions to real world problems. We don't turn to thoughts and prayers because that ain't going to help anybody. We know that 2 hands working does more than 1,000 clasped in prayer, right? So it's humans helping humans and understanding that we must produce the solutions to our own problems. And this is where all of our ethics come from, and in believing in humanity, in all of the positive aspects that religion has, which there are not many positive aspects, but humanism has all of the positive aspects of religion.
Right. You say that it's illogical to believe in the any of the religious stories, but it actually seems very logical to me to ground an ethic in God, even though I don't believe in a God. But
how?
Well, if the problem of society is always monitoring cheaters. And if you invent a invisible cop, that's going to hold you accountable for whatever you do when no one's looking, that seems like a very logical adaptation to me, right? Even if we believed in, like, if you believe that law enforcement is inept, you're going to behave differently than if you believe law enforcement is apt and ever present, correct? It's why these authoritarian dictatorships can get off the ground, which is a terrible thing. If people are voluntarily opting into a system where you get the same kind of, monitoring their personal behavior to the benefit of society, it seems better to me than some of the other more. You said nihilistic. I'm like leaning on the word nihilistic, but some of the more authoritarian ways that we can do that.
Yeah, I want to clarify what I meant by nihilism.
Yeah, I'm curious about that because you said that nihilism may be good.
I got into a discussion where one of the bigger problems that I have is I've been lied to my whole life. And I have to whittle down what things turn out to be lies that I've just always believed. I mean, for a while, I was an atheist for 15 years before I realized what an atheist was. Because I was told that an atheist is somebody who doesn't believe in anything, which I took to mean like Zen kind of thing, that you believe nothing is real, that everything is an illusion. Well, I think that reality is real by definition, which is another big problem that I have with a lot of other people, not just religious people. You have people that want to believe that that all of reality is just an illusion, like we're living in the Matrix or something like that. It strikes me as completely pointless, this position a lot of people adopt, and they can't defend it the way they think they can. But nihilism doesn't mean that there's no purpose to anything. It means that the purpose is not applied externally. Is it God didn't give you a purpose? You give you a purpose. If you want your life to have a meaning, go find what meaning you want your life to have. It was not assigned to you by someone else.
Yeah. That can put a lot of pressure on people because there are, like I said, humanity is on a spectrum. There are people who are go-getter type A's like myself, who I have no problem going out and finding a purpose for myself. But there are people that just want to be cogs in the machine. They want the purpose bestowed on them by their family or their community, or, I mean, the idea, and one of the reasons why I think the different religious systems have such wide buy-in is because they have something for everyone. They have something for the person that just wants to be the cog in the machine. They have something for the person that wants to be the go-getter. And if we were moving towards a world where they're voluntary, that changes everything. I don't know that we're ever going to get past the social dynamic, but I'm curious, where are you at, just to bring it back to the evolution question, where are you at on the religion as a adaptation? I would say that you probably fall under that it is, well, you've said it's a form, like your hypothesis is that religion is a form of exploitation, which there are I mean, the path to power thing we never really got back to, but a lot of people, there are other institutions where people can find paths to power. That, I mean, if your argument is that people are going to abuse power in institutions, then it's easy to say, well, then don't we have to get rid of government because there's corruption in government? You know, there's corruption in public schools. Don't we have to get rid of public schools? I mean, my argument would be that we have to eliminate the corruption. So
yeah, and that would be mine as well.
Okay. So, but where are you at on the religion as a biological evolutionary adaptation?
Well, remember that religion didn't cause the problem. Faith is the root of the problem, and faith itself is born out of irrational, illogical thinking and inability to understand reason. So that's what needs to be repaired in people, in humanity. You know, for people, I would like to have people take philosophy in high school, you know, as long as it's taught correctly. And when I say correctly, it means that way too often, and my biggest problem with philosophy is that it always seems that somebody's using it as an excuse to pretend that reality isn't real, which is one of my pet peeves. Because even if everything was a religion, it's still, even if everything was an illusion, it's still our reality. We're still stuck in it. So quit questioning that which we cannot change and must still apply to as if it is reality. Reality is real. Reality is reality. So that's our reality regardless. Shut up about trying to pretend that it isn't. It's not going to give you magic Neo powers. So are you into the religion as a evolutionary adaptation? Have you considered this or? No, it's not. I mean, we have a propensity to have irrational thoughts. I mean, the old adage about it's safer if you think that the reason that the grass is moving is because there's a tiger in there. If it turns out that there was a tiger and you thought there was a tiger and so you fled, okay, well, you're safe. But if you assume that, well, what are the chances of it being a tiger? And then it turns out it is a tiger, well, then you're dead. Right. So people want to use that Pascal's wager kind of argument to justify holding irrational assumptions. I obviously don't see it the way that the illustration was intended. One of the things that I see is that we are so selfish, so self-centered, that we tend to think that somebody is watching everything we do. Somebody's always watching. There's a chance you may think you're alone in the woods, but there could be somebody watching you that you don't know can see you, right? And this could be on anything. Certainly the things you do online. I mean, even before there were computers. I mean, you may think you're alone, but there might be somebody in the closet staring at you, or something like that. So we tend to think that there's either enemies or there's admirers, and somebody can see us, and somebody's paying attention, and what we do is very important somehow. And so it's so easy to imagine that somebody has the ability to always be watching you. And so they concoct these omnipotent gods who, of course, know everything about you. And not only do they see everything that you do, but they know why you do it, because they can read your mind too. Part of the irrationality of being human.
One of the things that I find fascinating, though, and it's completely ironic, but the irrationality, I completely agree with you on. People are irrational, but I think the evolutionary logic is completely rational, because a lot of the things that will appear irrational in behavior are actually completely logical if you conceptualize religion as binding people into these cooperative groups. Like you said, people inherently believe somebody is watching them. Well, what starts off as the byproduct becomes the adaptation. The byproducts of yesterday are the adaptations of today, because in the community where, there's a bunch of individuals, and most of the individuals believe someone is watching them, and therefore modify their behavior accordingly, and don't cheat each other. The people that don't have that adaptation, that don't feel like someone is watching them and revert to, chimpanzee morality where they just lie, cheat, and steal. Like as soon as the group gets wind of them lying and cheating and stealing, guess what's going to happen to that person? They're going to get taken out of the gene pool. Their family's going to get taken out of the gene pool. And the group is going to continue to facilitate this byproduct that soon becomes an adaptation. And everyone has this monitoring mechanism inside of them.
Yeah, and people need to understand, where does morality really come from? Because somebody out there listening thinks that morality comes from God, which obviously it doesn't. Right? You have the threat of an indomitable despot that you better do what I say or else, and he's going to somehow know what you do. But you know what else he knows? He knows every bullshit excuse you use to rationalize what you did. So he's always going to forgive you if you ask forgiveness, and he's always going to understand what your excuse is to rationalize it. So people do horrible, horrible things knowing their God will just forgive them and that it doesn't matter. But where morality really comes from is just what you were just saying, that if you are selfish, if you're productive in society, you are empathetic to other people, then your type of personality is going to be praised and it's going to be perpetuated, and you're preferential. And so more of the empathetic type, that you have compassion for your family, friends, and fellows, there's going to be more of those. But the people who are selfish and vindictive and cruel and just care about themselves, those people are going to be eliminated from society, either by being imprisoned or banished or abandoned or murdered or executed, probably is the appropriate word. So those people tend to get eliminated from the gene pool, and those type of deviants should be minimized at least. So where morality really comes from is that you can't constantly piss off your own peers, or there's going to be repercussions from that. That's where it really comes from. It's not some vindictive God. And it certainly isn't the threat of hell. It seems that hell only frightens people when they start to think. It doesn't seem to bother at all the people who are actually committing acts of evil, because even though it's a common belief that if you're evil, you will go to hell, really, the Bible and the Quran both spell out very clearly, it doesn't matter how evil you are. All that matters is that you believe. And it doesn't matter how good you are. If you don't believe, you're going to hell. So you have to believe, and it doesn't matter good or evil. Gullibility is the sole criteria for redemption.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking for about an hour now, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but this has been a fascinating conversation. I'm curious if there is anything. Like, do you agree that anti-theists are making a claim that the world would be a better place without religion? That's the best way I have of conceptualizing.
On the surface, yes, but what we understand. I'm speaking for a lot of other people. I probably shouldn't,
right. But speak for yourself. So
I understand that as an anti-theist, that religion is not the problem. It's the cause of a lot of problems, but it's not the cause of its own problem. It's caused by faith, and faith is caused by irrationality and prejudice.
Right. Now, and what is your definition that you're using of faith? Just believing things without evidence, correct?
And that's the common definition, yes. I like to phrase it that faith is an assertion of unreasonable conviction assumed without reason and defended against all reason.
Right. And I guess my problem is that just that idea that the world would be a better place without religion, I don't think has met the burden of claim on the evidence. So, while I agree with you,
what advantage can there be in believing, in convincing yourself completely, going against all wisdom, that you're going to believe something that is not evidently true? Not consider the possibility where it is possible, when it is possible, which religion is not even possible, but to be completely convinced and refuse to change your mind about something that is not evidently true, nor even possible.
If we could have a utopian, conflict-free society that was based on some voluntary adherence to some invisible spaghetti monster, okay, would that be a better world than a world that was conflict-ridden with no religion?
Would a great world be better than a bad world? Yeah, I agree. A great
world based on an untruth, I guess, is what I'm getting at. I think the anti-theist ethic is based on the idea that reality is always best. And I'm just not convinced that it is. I'm not convinced that
I'm sorry that we're going to have to agree to disagree, because truth is always better than lies.
Right. Okay. And I'm that's fine. I totally. This is I love the David Hume quote that truth springs from argument among friends. I think it's fine to disagree, and I'm glad my audience has wanted me to have this conversation with you, and like they always want me to talk to other anti-theists, because I'm trying to make the argument that there is there is logic in the illogical, which is you got to at least give me that my position is damn near untenable.
I grant that it's damn near untenable. Yeah, I'll grant you that. But the idea that there can be some good in a world dominated by religion, you haven't expressed that. What we have, in fact, is people who believe nonsense and who hate each other over the nonsense they believe, and they kill each other, and they ruin their own families, they ruin their own lives, they stifle their own ability to think. They don't produce anything. They literally wish upon a star to get their problems solved, and go backward on everything. And they excuse themselves that they don't have to take care of the planet, for example, because Jesus is going to come back and roast everything anyway. And it doesn't matter if we overpopulate, because we need to bring more souls unto the Lord. So people are doing, in the name of religion, everything that they need to not be doing, or they should be doing the opposite of. Religion is just an entirely wholly detrimental on every level, in every respect. There's not a positive aspect of it.
Well, if religion is causing people to not cheat other people, that's not a positive thing. I mean,
but they are cheating other people.
Well, there's always going to be corruption.
Look at all of the creationist movement. Look at the political alignments. Look at the way that why are they trying to repeal the Johnson Amendment? They don't even have to, because the churches have always been telling their congregations exactly how to vote according to their prejudice. They've always been violating that law. Corruption is what religion is made of.
So you're making the argument that between group conflict is caused by religion. And I don't necessarily know that if we eliminated religion,
religion is being used as a tool of corruption and control, and with entirely negative effects.
Right, but
whatever trivial thing anybody can say that their religion does, there are secular and humanist organizations that do better in every one of those cases, and are not doing the other evil, atrocious, horrible things.
Right. Well, I'm not here to make an argument for religion. I'm making an argument for a scientific understanding of religion. I know that gets lost in the shuffle a lot of times, so I just want to be clear that my ultimate goal is just to understand religion from a scientific perspective. I'm trying to articulate just a descriptive understanding of religion. So, and like I said, I feel there are logical reasons why religion exists. I'm not necessarily sure that we could eliminate it without losing pro-social benefits. I understand that you disagree that there are any pro-social benefits that exist. So,
I didn't say that there's no pro-social benefits that exist. I mean, anytime you get a community of people gathered together for whatever reason, it could be a club of people who appreciate that particular football team, or this band of musicians, whatever. Anytime you get a club gathered together of furries, whatever it is, that people who have a common interest, okay, there's a pro-social benefit there. It's just that in the case of religion, it's also a very dangerous thing that acts in a lot of people a lot like drug addiction, and it is politically corruptive, and it is controlling and manipulative and deceptive and all of that. I mean, it's a thing that exists, so there is a logical, rational, scientific explanation for why it exists. I agree with you about that.
Okay. Well, the problem that I see you making is the foisting of costly externalities onto external groups. That's what you're upset about, right? Like even in the evolution debate, where you're talking about them trying to strong arm creationism into public schools, that is them wanting to foist an externality, a costly externality, onto outsiders, because there are people in public schools that don't believe in creationism, like trying to to force their belief system onto other people is wrong. And I agree with you there that I think it should be voluntary. So but I feel like a lot of these battles are being waged because it's more of a tribalism thing. And I don't know that religion is the source of that tribalism. I think human psychology is the source of that tribalism.
Well, again, religion is caused by faith. Faith is caused by irrational thinking. So
right, but
we agree on that point.
There are places though where even in science there's irrational beliefs, and those become a problem as well. So
the tools of science, and science has tools in place or policies in place that are supposed to minimize or eliminate bias.
Yeah.
And that's a great place to start. But of course, religion goes the opposite way and encourages bias.
Somehow in the in the founding of America, the separation of church and state, I think, was just incredible because it allowed these religions to be separated from politics. It forced us to all use reason and empiricism in the political realm. I know it doesn't always happen, but in theory, I think that's what the separation of church and state gave us in our American way of politics. So
I'm sure in the largely deist collection of founding fathers, when they're coming into the Enlightenment, everybody's becoming smarter and smarter, everything's getting better and better. They were in a culture where they didn't see the waves of great awakening resurgence of religion in the United States coming. They thought that there's going to be a line of progression, so they didn't word it strongly enough. You know, when they said in their personal letters to each other that there should be a wall of separation between church and state. Well, they needed to say that in the Declaration or in the Constitution. They needed to say that, and they needed to be much more explicit about it, that just because you claim to believe some ridiculous thing doesn't give you special privilege over anybody else. You know, everybody has to take their hat or their headgear off to show their face for their driver's license picture. We don't care what poppycock you pretend to believe in. You know, that's the kind of wording that we should have had.
Well, I don't think I'm going to convince you, but this has been a great conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. Did you have a good time?
I did. I'm curious at the end what you think you're not going to convince me of.
Well, I'm not convinced. Like, is not the secular humanist endeavor to replace religion, to erase religion? I don't know. So what is it? Go ahead.
Okay. As I said before, it's realizing that we have we need real world situations for real world problems. That we humans are the only things that are going to be able to come up with our solutions. Wishing on a star and sending thoughts and prayers ain't going to fix anything.
And what do you mean by fix?
Whatever problem you might have, humans resolve their own solutions. There are secular religious people within the humanist movement who understand that while they may believe in whatever God they were raised in. I remember meeting a Sikh, for example, at a humanist conference, and I was surprised that there was a Sikh there. But they understand that you can't ask God to fix anything; He's not going to. Pretending that if it doesn't get fixed, well, that's God's will, and if the situation gets better over time, well, then that's God acting. No matter how, no matter what the situation is, you can always come up with an excuse for how God did it according to His plan some way. But it's still random dice rolls. It's still not getting the problem resolved. So humans have to band together to come up with their own solutions. And humans have community. We have need of community. We have need of belonging. And so we have a set of ethics. And every positive ethic of humanity is encompassed in humanism.
Right. I read this really good book called Beyond Revenge, and it's about the evolution of how we got past the innate intuition to get even, right? That forgiveness is a pro-social adaptation, and it's a hyper form of forgiveness. It's forgive the enemy, which I don't know if you know, they work this out in game theory as well. The game program that is the world champion in the prisoner's dilemma is generous tit for tat, which is basically the equivalent of turn the other cheek. So there are these memes, these pro-social memes that are in Christianity that are put into the culture through this narrative technology. And I don't necessarily know how you get that forgive the enemy idea into the culture to get people to think that that's a good idea, because I think in our genes, biologically, our intuition is, get even, kill their family. Never forget. Like, I think that's part of the problem with our politics now, is that there's really no forgiveness for people. There's no forgiveness mechanism. And I just wonder, like, how does secular humanism take that idea that we have empirical evidence, scientific evidence that that's the way to be, that's the most pro-social way to be, but how do we convince people to be that way without all the religious apparatus?
Speaking personally, I've seen people in the political spectrum who will vote against their own interests as long as they can amuse themselves that they're hurting the libtard. So they will hurt themselves on the fantasy that they think they're hurting me. I don't get that. Obviously, that's not my position. I mean, my position is that the most outspoken atheist, anti-theist activists that I've ever met in my life, almost all of them started out as believing Christians. So the next Christian that I'm arguing with, I could change. I change people's minds all the time. I get emails constantly about people saying that I changed their mind with some argument or some video or whatever, or some discussion or debate. So I know that it happens. I know that it happens frequently. And the next person that I talk to could be the next Matt Dillahunty or Seth Andrews. So just because you're religious doesn't mean you're evil. It doesn't mean you're necessarily my enemy. The curious thing is I've converted a lot of people out of religious ideologies and all of the negativity that comes with that. But I can't seem to convince anyone politically. If they hate liberals, they're going to continue to hate liberals.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are substituting what they would have been religious in previous generations, and now politics has sort of become their religion, which I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing, because
it's necessarily not a good thing.
So we're in complete agreement there.
Yeah, because we know that religion and politics are so closely tied together. We know that in every example where people want to say how evil atheists are, in an atheist government, they never look at Norway and say, look, or at Iceland, right, and say, look how evil those countries, because those countries are ideal for their political structure and everything. But they always look to the time when people believed in their politics, specifically communism, as though it were a religion, when they had a religious conviction in their politics. And that is every bit as evil, and probably worse, than religion is. As I said, politics is actually less rational than religion is.
Yeah, I agree there. I'm curious, like, I hear the atheists sometimes are upset that people think that they can't be moral or they don't trust them. But I don't always see the atheists or anti-theists articulating the reason why. I see that as something very logical. The Christians, the believers, they understand that they have accountability through the invisible cop, the invisible authoritarian, as you like to call him, right? And they conceptualize you as not being under that authority. So it would be the same exact thing as if, you had your wild brother-in-law who thought cops were all Keystone cops and inept, and, he wants to go rob a bank because he thinks you guys would get away with it. So, I mean, it seems very logical to not necessarily trust somebody that you think believes they're outside of the accountability system that they have set up and conceptualized.
Yeah, your description was so accurate. If you only knew.
So, what do you? So it sounds like you understand this.
Well, I have a different view of accountability than what I think believers would expect me to do. I mean, one thing I do have to respect law enforcement, but even if I didn't, I still am concerned about my own ethics and my own accountability.
Right.
I have to realize that just because I can show that something is true doesn't mean that everything that I believe is true. It doesn't mean that everything I hold will always be true. I have to remember that the most progress I've ever made in my life have been a handful of times when I was proven to be wrong about something and was forced to change my position. Mm-hmm. Which I'm honest enough to have changed my position a number of times, and hopefully at every time will always be a correction. I want to make sure of that.
Right.
And I had something else I was going to add to that about the accountability. I think I already said it before about realizing that you don't know everything is the first thing to knowing anything.
But just in materialistic terms, if you lie and cheat on your wife, or say you're a politician, which, a lot of atheists complain.
You lie and cheat on your wife?
No. That seems to be par for the course, but you understand that they have this system of accountability where they think if you lie, cheat, and steal, even if you get away with it, they think there is some accountability in the afterlife. And they also think that you knowing this, that there is accountability in the afterlife, will make you less likely to lie, cheat, and steal. And therefore, you are someone that is more trustworthy than someone who doesn't believe and could potentially just do whatever they want.
Yeah, see, that's why I think they made up the posthumous stick and the carrot. Because the Bible says that, people will be punished in this life, not in the next one.
Really?
Yeah.
Why did they get rid of that?
Because it obviously didn't work. Because you have people that ascend to positions of incredible power that have absolutely no accountability. They don't deserve anything that they have, and they don't even appreciate what they have. They're complete worthless people. And yet they're super rich and powerful and lord over everybody else, even though they're stupid and inept and everything. And then you have, at the same time, people who you have all the mercy in the world for these people because they have endured worse than I have ever had in my life. Their weekly occurrence is something I could never bear. Mm-hmm. That they have the worst lives ever, and they're sweet and they're kind and they're beautiful people, and yet all of this horrible crap keeps happening to them.
Yeah.
And I feel so sorry for these people. Fortunately, I'm not pitying myself. I've always been in a good position, but I looked around me and I've always seen that other people around me did not ever do, very rarely does anybody do as well or appreciate things as well, or just have be fortunate enough or healthy or whatever it is. Other people have often gotten a lot worse than me. And I have to bear in mind that, it could always be worse than it is. It could always be a lot worse than it is. It could be a lot worse than this tomorrow. So I better appreciate what I got today. And somebody told me once upon a time, you don't appreciate what you've got until it's gone. And I thought, that was stupid. So I decided my entire life that I'm going to appreciate what I have while I have it.
Yeah. Well, do you have any upcoming projects or anything you want to talk about? Anything you want to pitch? I know you've been going back and forth with Kent Hovind in response videos, which are hilarious. Everyone should check them out.
Yeah, I'm going to do another a live audience debate on March 30th, and we're going to the debate. It's going to be in Waco, Texas, and the debate topic is: has Christianity been historically opposed to science?
Really, that should be interesting.
Oh yeah, I'm floored that anyone is even going to try to argue that from the other side. Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, have fun with that. And I'm also going to be speaking from the steps of the Texas State Capitol in Austin on Atheist Day, which is March 23rd.
Cool. So I'll go ahead and end it here. I do thank you for your time once again. If you ever want to talk again, if you want to talk about anything, this is a fascinating conversation. It's a debate that I'm constantly having, and I like to engage on more of the scientific side because, like I said, one of the reasons why I became an atheist was because the science just fascinates me, and I'm a lifelong learner. So,
okay, well, I appreciate it very much. Enjoyed it.
Well, first of all, if you don't have a purpose, it isn't that your life becomes neutral in a meaningless sense. It's that your life becomes characterized by unbearable suffering. Because the baseline condition of life.
I might actually debate Ken Hovind. I thought it was fascinating. You're doing response videos with Kent Hovind, but he's too embarrassed to like actually just have a debate.
Well, he wanted to do a debate where he could control the venue or somehow control the information. He's not able to address anything that I put to him, and he's never faced somebody that actually takes him on. He's always gone up against scientists who expect that they're going to be talking to credible people, or that they're going to be debating people that have some honor or ethics. And of course, Hovind just does a bullshit fest where he just lies as much as he can in the time that he's got. And then the scientist is trying to educate an audience that they expect to be honest and rational. And of course, Hovind's audience is not remotely. I mean, they're all about make-believe. They're all about find whatever excuse you can to deny what we need to so that we can make believe something else. And so I came up with a dozen or so things that Hovind depends on. These are the lies that Hovind depends on and that he cannot possibly address. He can't correct any of them, and nor can he defend them, but nobody's ever attacked him that way. And so that's why I'm amused that I've done more damage to him in our couple of interactions than anyone ever has.
I'm actually coming at it from a different angle. The debate question that I pitched to them was, can evolution prove the secular utility of religion? Because then I put him kind of in a bind, because if evolution can prove the secular utility of religion, that's useful for him, right? But at the same time, he's still this huge evolution denier. So, possibly, I think that could be an interesting debate, but I'm not exactly sure how that would pan out. So it's an interesting.
I'll give you the dozen or so things that he has to lie about, and you can press him on those dozen or so things.
Because the baseline condition of life is something like unbearable suffering.